I said that she was butchered. That was, or is in this case, the cause of death and not the careful removal of her organs, officer. A person can still live if you remove one of their organs the right way, but not by being butchered beforehand. I paused to collect myself to not be angered by his false accusations. So more than likely we are looking for a butcher who got bored of butchering the animals he serves at his shop, and does unto the people like his new prey for an undesired want by his unsound mind. I finished my response to the tall irate officer. His response was to walk off angrier than he was before. I in return walked to the entrance to find the smaller officer so he could take me back to the carriage. As I got closer to him I saw that he was sitting on the steps near the entrance of the building, and noticed that he was looking at a photograph of a woman. I sat right next to him and spoke. "Who might the lovely lady be?" "Your daughter, perhaps." I spoke to him to try and start up a conversation to try and make his mind at ease from the scene of the crime. He smiled and proudly said, "No, she's my wife. Looks like an angel, huh?" He spoke, still looking at the picture in his hands. "Yes, you're a lucky man, and seems as if she is a lucky lady to have a good man such as yourself." I responded with a smile to lighten things up. He smiles bigger and from ear to ear as he pats me on the back and knowing the fact that he had made a new friend. "So what is her name and yours, if you don't mind me asking?" I asked to further our conversation to put his mind at ease more. "Her name is Rebecca, and I'm Officer Petter." He gleefully spoke. I straightened my tie and introduced myself. "I'm Dr. Jack Batchumber." I spoke confidently. No relation to the other Jack." I finished jokingly, and as he chuckled I asked, "So what's Mr. Sunshine and Rainbow's name?" "Edward. His name is Officer Edward," Petter responded with a smile. "Now I know their names." And at that moment Officer Edward came out and grabbed me by my collar to pull me aside jerkingly to question me further. As he threw me against the wall, he glared with a rage-filled look and spoke hatefully. "Just how did you know that she was butchered right away, huh?" He spoke harshly. "You got something to do with this, don't you, Dr. Batchumber?" he asked demandingly. I looked him in the eyes as I spoke. "I'm a surgeon by trade." I started. "I should know a bad job of cutting when I see one, shouldn't I?" I responded with the same tone as he had used. He didn't like my response and held me as he hit me in the gut with his police bat. Petter saw what had happened and jumped in to break up the fight that had ensued. "He just answered your question, Edward. Just the way you asked him to." Petter spoke as he confronted his partner to defuse the situation. Edward looked puzzled as Petter spoke up. "Well, he didn't have to sound like a wiseacre to me doing so." He spoke harshly. Petter looked crossly at Edward. "Well, maybe if you weren't accusing him of stuff that he didn't do, and trying to make him look bad, maybe you'd get some respect." He spoke with a pause to calm himself so he wouldn't say something that he'd regret. "You need to show respect to him to get respect." Petter stood up to Edward for me. Officer Edward looked even more enraged and walked back to the carriage because he knew that he was in the wrong. "Don't think too low of him," Petter stated to me. "He's just angry that we haven't caught Jack the Ripper yet, even though that still doesn't give him the right to do that." Petter tried to apologize for his partner's actions. I knew that I had to say something to keep Petter at ease, and to not show that I was angry, and to reassure him that I didn't think too lowly of his partner. "I forgave him already," or "I understand what he's going through," or something along those lines. I understand that he must be feeling stressed over the killer still being at large, so I wouldn't hold a grudge over him for his actions. I finally responded to Petter with a genuine look. He began to look relieved as he heard me say the things I had told him. We then got back in the carriage and headed back to the jailhouse because there were no leads left to follow up on. It was as if the man wanted us to know that it was him all along, but for some godforsaken reason, he didn't want us to know where he was. Oddly enough, it's either or, but in this case, it's both. As we made it back, I headed back to the questioning room that I was put in because I assumed that there was more questioning to be had. Petter then came and got me so that I could help out with figuring out who it could be. As Petter and I made our way to another room where we would be discussing our plan of action, Edward began to speak as we sat down. As I was told, we have 7 suspects. One's a butcher, one's a surgeon, a prostitute, a jealous friend, family member, neighbour, or a rogue pimp. Edward told the group sternly. Petter looked puzzled at the list Edward spoke of. "Why would we need to investigate a pimp? Was she a streetwalker?" He spoke in a hushed tone as if he had talked in a vulgar way and so the others wouldn't hear him. "Yes, she was a famous one at that, so she'll have to have had enemies in her field of work." Edward responded. I spoke up. "Okay, so are we going to each one individually or all together?" Edward looked cross at me as if to wonder why I even came and responded with, We'll call them in and interrogate them that way so we'd have an upper hand. Petter spoke, pondering his idea. Why don't we just go and talk to each one instead of asking them to come here? Because wouldn't we be able to catch them in a lie at their place of work? Or if there is more than one, they could tip the other off to form a plan of action of their own without our knowing? Petter asked Edward. I looked surprised as to how he was able to come up with a great plan like that. Edward then second-guessed himself and went with Petter's idea because it was better sounding and made more sense to catch them off guard and catch them before they could pull a fast one on us. I then pondered the thought of what if they tried to escape. They'd know exactly where to go. So I pulled Petter aside and asked privately, and he responded with, Not to worry. The buildings will be surrounded and they'll have no way out without an officer knowing it first. Thanks for listening to part 2 of my audiobook. If you are interested in buying my book, there will be a link in the description below. It is a digital version, and for right now I do not have a physical one to sell. And again, thanks for listening and have a great day.